आइए पढ़ें डॉक्टर अंबेडकर को। और आज हम राउंड टेबल कॉन्फ्रेंस की कड़ी में उनका लास्ट स्पीच जो है डिमांड फॉर स्पेसिफिक एंड कॉन्क्रीट प्रोविजंस फॉर सेफ गार्ड ऑफ डिप्रेस्ड क्लासेस इन फ्यूचर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन 5 पढ़ने जा रहे हैं। ये प्लीनरी सेशन ऑन जनरल रिव्यू इन 8th सिटिंग ऑन 19 जनवरी 1931 और इसमें मैं वही पढ़ रही हूँ जो अंबेडकर ने लिखा है। और मेरा सिंपल एक छोटा सा प्रयास है कि अगर आप बाबा साहब को नहीं पढ़ पा रहे हैं तो मेरे माध्यम से आप उन्हें सुन लीजिए। और इसके लिए मैं आपको जो मेरा चैनल है रीडिंग अंबेडकर उसको सब्सक्राइब करने के लिए ज़रूर बोलूँगी। अगर आप सुन रहे हैं, आप तक वीडियो आ रही है तो चैनल को सब्सक्राइब ज़रूर करें। आपका सब्सक्रिप्शन और अच्छे कमेंट्स मेरा मनोबल बढ़ाते हैं। तो चलिए शुरू करते हैं रीडिंग अंबेडकर और बाबा साहब। आइए पढ़ते हैं बाबा साहब को, आइए पढ़ते हैं अंबेडकर को। डिमांड फॉर specific and concrete provisions for safeguards of depressed classes in future constitution. Plenary session on general review in 8th sitting on 19 January 1931. ये कोट है। कोट का मतलब है कि ये बाबा साहब ने खुद बोला था और ये उन्हीं का लिखा हुआ है, उन्हीं का बोला हुआ है। तो मैं पढ़ती हूँ। Mr. Prime Minister, the Roundtable Conference has had to grapple with two most important questions which must arise in any attempt to organize the political life of a community. The problem of responsible government was one of them, and the other was that of representative government. On the question of responsible government in the provisions, I have very little to say. I accept the report of the committee and the subject to my dissent. I stand by it. But regarding the question of responsible government in the center, I am afraid I take a different view. It would be dishonest to say that the report of the Federal Structure Subcommittee does not contemplate change in the bureaucratic form of government as we know it today. But it would be equally dishonest for me to conceal from you my opinion that this change is shadowy and not substantial, and responsibility is bogus and not real. The Lord Chancellor told us that he had shown the seed and it was for us to tend the plant. Sir, we are indeed very grateful to the Lord Chancellor of the great part he has played in this momentous conference. Grateful as I am to him, as I am not sanguine that the plant he promised will grow. I fear the grain he had chosen for his seed is sterile, and the soil in which he has cast is not congenial to its growth. I had submitted to the Lord Chancellor a statement containing my views on the future constitution of Federal India. I do not know whether or not the committee on which he presided considered it, for I do not find any reference to it in the report of the committee on which he presides. I adhere to the view I expressed therein, and I cannot give my approval to the Constitution, which so largely departs from those views. Indeed, if I were given a choice between the existing system and the cross bred by the committee, I would prefer the existing one. But sir, if the Constitution of the central government contained in the report of the committee satisfied Sir T.B. Sapru, who has been the friend, guide and philosopher of this conference, if it is agreeable to Mr. Jayakar, who proclaimed himself the representative of youth of India, and if it please Sir A.P. Patro, who speaks, as he says, in the name of the non-Brahmin of India, if it is not for me to oppose, my attitude therefore is that of one who does not approve but who also does not obstruct. I will leave it to those who bless it to carry it through. This attitude is all the more agreeable to me because I have no mandate from those whom I represent regarding the form of government. But I have a mandate, and that is, while not opposing responsible government, to see that no responsible government was established unless it was at the same time accompanied by a truly representative government. It is when I took look at the achievements of the conference to find out how it has dealt with the question of representative government that I feel most disappointed. The franchisee and the representation of the different class in the legislature are the two pillars on which truly representative government can rest. Everybody knows that the Nehru Committee had adopted adult suffrage and that the part of the constitution framed by it has the support of all political parties in India. When I come to this conference, I had thought that so far as the question of franchisee was concerned, the battle had already been won. But in the franchisee committee, I was completely disillusioned. I found to my great surprise that all those who had signed the Nehru report had done so much mental reservation, so much so that it was difficult to persuade even the Indian liberal to consent to enfranchise 25% of the population of provincial legislatures. The franchisee for the central legislature is no doubt an unknown quantity, but I have no hope that it will be such as to make the central legislature more representative of the people than the provincial legislatures are going to be. A franchise so limited must necessarily make the future government of India a government of masses by the classes. Regarding the question of distribution of seats among the majority and various minority communities, we all know that there is deadlock. The deadlock is largely due, in my opinion, to the mischief done in the past. I'm sure that if the authorities in India had acted in the past on the principle of justice to all and favors of none, problems would not have become so difficult solution. The British government set different values on different committees according to the political use they made for them and gave to the committees an extraordinary share of political power by denying it to the depressed classes in a measure which was their rightful due. In this matter, the most aggrieved community is the depressed classes. And I was hoping that this conference would proceed on the principle that was wrong settled and never settled, and give to the depressed classes the rightful quota of seats by revolution of the old values. But this has not been happened. The claim of the other minorities has already been acknowledged and defined. All that they stand in need of the alteration and amendments to bring them in conformity with the large structure and increased scope of new government. Whatever be the alterations and amendments, no one will dare to furrow out the foundation that has already been laid down. The case of the depressed classes is totally different. Their claim have been just heard. They have not been adjudged, and I do not know how many of them will be admitted. To my mind, it is not improbable that, having regard to the hopelessness of their position, the claim of the depressed classes to representation may be whittled down to satisfy the ever-increasing scramble by the communities who are maneuvering not so much for production as for power. In view of this, I am bound to make my attitude perfectly plain, as the right of the depressed classes in the future constitution are not defined. Any announcement that might be made on behalf of my His Majesty government regarding the introduction of responsibilities in the center as well as in the provinces should make it clear that any advance in that direction must be on condition and subject to the agreement between the communities, which would provide effective safeguards for the rights and interests of the depressed classes. I must emphasize the gravity of the situation and bring to your notice that no announcement will be acceptable to us unless the position is made perfectly clear in this behalf, and that failing this is I and my colleagues will be unable to accept the responsibility of participating in the future work of conference and will be compelled to disassociate ourselves from it. Sir, in asking you to do so, I am asking you to do more than give effect to your pledged word. The British Parliament and those who speak for it have always stated that they are trustees for the depressed classes, and I am sure that what they have been seeing is no one of the conventional lies of civilizations which are all led to utter keep human relations conversations as pleasant as possible. In my opinion, it is therefore the bounden duty of the government to see that trust is not betrayed. And let me tell you, Mr. Prime Minister, that depressed classes would regard it as the greatest betrayal on the part of His Majesty's government. If it were to leave us to the mercy of those who have taken no interest in our welfare and whose prosperity and greatness is founded on our ruination and degradation. For saying so, I will be called a communalist by the nationalists and patriots of India. I am not afraid of that. India is a peculiar country and her nationalists and patriots are peculiar people. A patriot and a nationalist in India is one who sees with open eyes and his fellow men treated as being less than man, but his humanity does not rise in protest. He knows that man and woman for no cause are denied their human rights, but it does not prick his civic sense to help action. He finds whole class of the people shut out from public employment, but it does not rouse his sense of justice and fair play. Hundreds of civil practices that injure man in society are perceived by him, but they do not sicken him with disgust. The patriots one cries power and more power for him, for his class. I'm glad I do not belong to that class of patriots. I belong to the class which takes its stand on democracy, on which it seeks to destroy monopoly in every shape and form. Our aim is to realize and practice our ideals of one man, one value in all walks of life, political, economical, and social. It is because representative government is one means to that end that depressed classes attached to it. It's great as and it because of its value to us, as I have urged upon you, necessary for making our declaration subject to its fulfillment. You may tell me that the depressed classes have your sympathy. My reply is, for sickened people, what is wanted is something more concrete, something more defined. You may despise me for being unduly apprehensive. My reply is that better to be despised for too anxious apprehensions rather than be ruined by too confident a security. Now the next one is sixth, because this whole debate and discussion and the speech is being divided into parts. So I'm reading the sixth part. Against sine die, adjournment of Minority Committee, 9th sitting on 8th October 1931. Please remember these dates, 8th October 1931, against sine die adjustment of the Minority Committee, 9th sitting. Now I start with the quote, and which is of speech of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, our loving Baba Sahib. Mr. Prime Minister, last night when we parted at the conclusion of the meeting of the informal committee, we parted although we with a sense of failure, at least with one common understanding, and that was that when we meet here today, none of us should make any speech or any comment that would cause exasperation. I'm sorry to see that Mr. Gandhi should have been guilty of a breach of his understanding. Excuse me, I must have the opportunity to speak. He started by giving what were, and according to him, the causes of failure of the informal committee. Now I have my own causes, which I think were responsible for the failure of the informal committee to reach an agreement. But I do not propose to discuss them now. What disturbed me after hearing Mr. Gandhi is that instead of confining himself to his proposition, namely that the minorities committee should adjourn sine die, he started casting certain reflections upon the representatives of the different committees who are sitting round this table. He said that the delegates were nominees of the government and that they did not represent the views of the respective communities for whom they stood. We cannot deny the allegation that we are nominees of the government, but speaking for myself, I have not the slightest doubt that even if the depressed classes of India were given to the chance of electing their representative to this conference, I would all the same find a place here. I say therefore that whatever I am a nominee or not, I fully represent the claim of my community. Let no man be under any mistaken impression as regarded that. Mr. The Mahatma has been always claiming that the Congress stand for the depressed classes and the Congress represents the depressed classes more than I or my colleagues can do. To that claim, I can only say that it is one of many false claims which irresponsible people keep on making, although the person concerned with regard of those claims have been invariably denying them. The Mahatma has been always claiming that Congress stands for the depressed classes and that the Congress represents the depressed classes more than I or my colleague can do. To that claim, I can say that it is one of the many false claims which irresponsible people keep on making, although the persons concerned with regard to those claims have been invariably denying them. I have here a telegram which I have just received from a place which I have never visited and from a man whom I have never seen, from the President of Depressed Classes Union, Kumaun Almora, which I believe is in the United Province, and which said in the following resolutions. And the quote is, "This meeting declares is no confidence in the Congress movement which has been carried on in and outside the country and condemns the method adopted by the Congress worker." I do not care to read further, but I can say that this, and I think if Mr. Gandhi will examine his position, he will find out the truth, that although there may be people in the Congress who may be showing sympathy towards the depressed classes are not in the Congress. That is a proposition which I propose to substantiate. I do not wish to enter into these points of controversy. They seem to me to be somewhat outside the main proposition. The main proposition which Mr. Gandhi has made is that this committee should be adjourned sine die. With regard to that proposition, I entirely agree with the attitude taken up by Sir Muhammad Saifi. I, for one, cannot consent to this proposition. It seems to me that there are only two alternatives: either that this minority committee should go on tackling the problems and trying to arrive at some satisfactory solution, if that is possible, and then if that is not possible, the British government should undertake the solution of that problem. We cannot consent to leave this to the arbitration of third parties whose sense of responsibility may not be the same as must be the sense of responsibility of the British government. Prime Minister, permit me to make one thing clear: the depressed classes are not anxious, they are not clamorous, they have not started any movement for claiming that there shall be an immediate transfer of power from the British to the Indian people. They have their particular grievances against the British people, and I think I have voiced them sufficiently to make it clear that we feel those grievances most genuinely. But to be true to facts, the position is that the depressed classes are not clamoring for the transfer of political power. This position, to put it plainly, is that we are not anxious for the transfer of power. But if the British government is unable to resist the forces that have been set up in the country, which do clamor for transference of political power, and we know for depressed classes in their present circumstances are not in a position to resist that, then our submission is that if you make that transfer will be accompanied by such constitution and by such provinces that the power shall not fall into the hands of a clique, into the hands of an oligarchy, or into the hands of a group of people, whether Mohammedans or Hindus, but that the solution shall be such that the power shall be shared by all communities in their respective proportions. Taking that view, I do not see how I, for one, can take any serious parts in the deliberations of the Federal Structure Committee unless I know where I and my community stand. Thank you. Please do not forget to subscribe the channel Reading Ambedkar, and I'm really personally thankful to you for sharing so much love and nice comments and encouraging me. Thank you.